Yo, what's up? How old are you?
23.
Do you support Donald Trump?
Yes.
What's your birth year?
Uh, April 17th, 2002.
You said what?
April 17th, 2002.
Okay. If you could go back in time and you could either vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, who would you rather vote for?
Trump.
Okay, why so?
Well, first off, before we start the conversation, I'd like to get your view on abortion,
Okay, what
your
about
stance.
abortion?
Just like what your overall stance is.
Well, I'm pro sentient life. Like, I think that it's going to be valuable after the point of sentience. So I'm cool with like Roe versus Wade being in place because I think that's pretty close to
So,
that.
I mean,
I prefer
how
Kamala
would you
Harris's abortion policy. I think that's great.
how would you if you were to be put in power, how would you legalize sentient life?
Have I debated you before?
No.
No. Okay.
People are saying it's a voice changer. I just have a sore throat, so I don't know.
No. That's okay at all. I genuinely think it sounds like I've talked to you before.
Yeah,
But
no.
sorry, what were you saying?
Sorry, I'm also cooking dinner if that's what the noise in the background. Yeah, how would you value like or legalize sentient life?
Well, I'm okay with Roe versus Wade being in place.
Okay, well the reason why I asked you that question is because I've been in your lives multiple times. I've heard your stance, and there is no scientific consensus on sentience.
Most
So
neuroscience papers indicate around 20 through 24 weeks. It does
right, and
not
I've
go
seen
even later
18
than that.
weeks. I've seen, yeah. I mean, let me just ask you this, I guess, hypothetical. So, would you say you would go up, let's say there was a room of um, brain dead patients, would you go up to them and basically like unalive them?
No, I would say that that would be the family that can determine and specifically like.
Right, no, but under your view, do you think it's wrong for someone to go in and unalive brain dead patients?
I mean, if it's someone that was an individual that was a part of their family, then they would have
No, let's say they
jurisdiction.
weren't a part of the family. Let's say they just like walked into a room full of brain dead people and they just like slapped them or unalived them or began to, hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Would you think that's okay under your view?
Without consent or jurisdiction from the family, I would think that's wrong.
Why is that? Because I mean, I think the reason why I asked this because I've heard
Slapping
your view
zygotes,
on yeah. So what's the difference there?
they already had a past subjective experience in
So
their
you
life.
value so you value only past subjective experiences, not
Yeah,
future?
if they've asserted preferences or have asserted preferences on like the conditions for like the context of a family, I think that the family should be able to make a determination in that context. Secondly, I would think the same thing would be true for dead bodies as well, because they had a past subjective experience and they asserted preferences, particularly on the conditions of what to do specifically with their body. I think that there would still be like a right specifically on like what specifically to do in terms of how to treat like dead bodies.
Why is everyone saying it's JJ? Who's JJ?
I definitely don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, that kid. Yeah, no, I'm not him. I could turn my camera on if. Anyways, yeah. Wait. So sorry, I didn't really get that point there. Um, so you're saying you. So how is that logically consistent with your zygote um, stance?
They haven't had a past subjective experience before, so they have no
So you
asserted
only. Oh, okay,
preferences.
that's what it was. Okay, so you don't value future subjective experiences.
I do, in so long as that there's a past or a present already established.
So if there were no past or present established, you wouldn't value the future subjective experience.
No, not to the extent that we would in terms of personhood.
No, I know you. Obviously, you would. I mean, under your view, but I'm saying like if there were like, okay, I kind of see your point there. I mean, I just don't. I think it's logically and scientifically inconsistent to value life at sentience because, like I said, there is no um, scientific consensus, even though there are studies
Scientific.
showing.
So you agree scientific consensus is the basis for science to be true?
right, but there is no
So then,
set. There is
to clarify, you must say that science is incredibly important when talking about who to vote for the president of the United States, right?
are we pivoting here, or I'm confused with your point is?
No, I'm bringing it, back to the conversation of what we're having. Are
Right.
you
I
saying
mean,
are you saying what you were talking about wasn't relevant to the topic?
it was. It
Okay,
was.
so can I bring it back to the topic?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, so like would you say that science is related to like what you care about when voting for president, correct?
In certain cases and scenarios, sure.
And only in certain cases?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think science is a feasible argument when I'm discussing immigration.
Sure, sure, but like if like a certain candidate denies science, like says the climate's going to start cooling and science just doesn't know it yet, and that windmills are causing whales to die in numbers never seen before, with no scientific evidence, saying that Tylenol usage during pregnancy causes autism when a study indicates that there's no association between Tylenol
Right. So
usage during
just as
pregnancy
there, I
and
mean,
autism after taking into account siblings and genetics
okay.
and family.
So just as there was is a lot or scientifical um
Scientific.
inefficiencies to, directly prove that Tylenol point, I mean, I could say the same thing about your sentience point. Like there is no consistent argument
Wait, there are
or
studies that
consensus.
indicate that
I
sentience of
understand
again
there are
23
I
24
understand
weeks.
there are
Actually,
studies.
most studies indicate that. The overwhelming level of evidence indicates that.
No, I mean, but that does not mean that there's a consensus. I do understand that there's studies. I
Consensus,
acknowledge
but
that.
there's overwhelming evidence. Correct?
No, I don't believe that. No, there is not overwhelming
Really?
evidence,
So
and
then,
that's
like, and
basically that's practically impossible to prove when
no,
a being can. What do you mean? No,
it's
now
not
you're denying
practically
science.
impossible. No, it's not
It
denying
is because
science.
scientists say that
What
it's hard
when
to
you're using prove in a different context? You're using prove as certain. No one's making a claim of certainty.
prove. I'm not saying certain. You prove in
Most
trial
probable
and
sense, like in a most probable sense, yeah, in a most probable sense, it is proven.
explain how. I'm really like finding it. So do you acknowledge or respect scientific consensus?
Yes, I do, but that doesn't mean it's the only basis for science. Like I
So
can
what other
I can establish things to be true in the context of science without consensus.
like what? Give me
Consensus
another
is a very
example,
good
please.
determination for it being true, though.
I think it should be the first determination, but can you give me an example where you wouldn't use that determination?
Where consensus wouldn't necessarily matter.
Yeah, or if you like any other methodology that you would use to validate any sort of
Yeah,
scientific claim.
prior to consensus being formed. Like literally, like about the usage of vaccines and different types of medicines, right? Especially if they're specialized into certain industries, there might not be consensus on a certain sort of mechanism to use, right? So there is obviously going to be a determination that a doctor can make in terms of what is the best route that you could undergo, considering the fact that again we don't have a 100% certain determination or a consensus in the field.
Okay, so I mean, let me just ask you this question. I'm really trying to get down to like the philosophical, like just your understanding of this.
I
So if
understand,
you
but
were to look
like
at a house,
I would love to be able to have a conversation about something relevant to the topic at this point. Like I would
it's
love to do
relevant.
that.
So
It
like
sounds like
I agree with Trump's stance on abortion,
okay, so let's have a
leaving it up to the
conversation about which
states.
one leads with your position better. So why is it preferable given that it still allows for abortion to occur?
Because I think it's very hard to.
I can't hear you cut
I
out.
don't know if can you hear me? Sorry, it might
Yeah.
be my fan. Yeah, I think it's very hard to not or federally get rid of abortion, especially this that quickly. I think it would have to gradually take its course. I don't think you can just. I think it would be a little bit too radical to just vindicate it. I think there are certain scenarios where abortions are okay. Um, but in the same sense, I do think it'd be very hard to, get it passed in courts and everything like that just to completely um, make it illegal.
Okay, so you just think it's not viable to get to the point of Trump, but you think it's better that he reduces access to abortion, correct?
But I think you reduce it gradually until you can fully um, make it illegal.
Well, then how do you feel that abortions have increased since Roe versus Wade was overturned, and so has maternal mortality?
Well, so my argument doesn't mean that abortions will overall um like end. I don't think leaving it up to the states would mean that it would end. It would just mean that if someone has an abortion in, let's say, New Jersey, and it's illegal in New Jersey, they could just go over to New York and get it done. But in terms of like the legal system, I just don't think you're able to answer your question. I don't think you're able to just outrightly make it illegal um, in the four
So then
years that
how
he's
is
in
this
office.
distinct from that context? It's led to more abortions occurring. It's led to a higher maternal mortality rate. It hasn't specifically, followed through with the goal that you had to reduce abortion. I think that one of the best ways to do that would be to increase people's ability to be able to take care of children, right? So you still maintain people's choice to be able to do so. You can just change the conditions in which people choose to have access to abortions by saying like we're going to provide better social programs for people to be able to take care of kids, given that they do have them, right? That would incentivize
So
people specifically to
I mean, I
not have
really don't understand.
abortions because it is the case that they
So
would then be able to take care of them to a greater
I don't
extent.
understand your stance on you believing that we should invest into social programs for people to be able to look after their kids, but yet you're also in agreement with getting rid of these said children.
No, I think people should have the choice to be able to get access to an abortion. That doesn't necessarily mean like I would want people to get abortions when they don't want them,
Okay,
right?
and
Like
also,
think about it this way, right? A lot of the cases I'm talking about are people who wouldn't get an abortion otherwise, but are getting an abortion because they can't take care of the kid. So I'm just telling you
then
that
I mean,
there's a certain
but
amount of people
there are
specifically
programs,
that wouldn't get abortions
but there
otherwise. So I'm saying that you can
right.
engage in policies that aren't restrictive policies, but they're meant to provide people access to basic necessities that they need,
I
and will
mean,
actually create
but there are
conditions for
programs.
reduction in abortion through voluntary means.
There are programs that are available if you can't take care of the kid. I mean, I don't think getting rid of the kid or the child or the baby is killing it unjustly. I don't think that's right. There's other ways to go about it.
Well, the reality is that the context of the programs that exist right now isn't the best for what people would like to leave their children with. And secondly, oftentimes people
Well, why does
specifically,
that matter? I mean, whoever's
even considering all of these connotations, people still would choose to get abortions to a lesser degree, given that they had a greater ability to be able to take care of the kid. And that's just a
so they
reality,
would rather.
regardless of whether or not specifically they're able to go through the context of an adoption program. They are specifically more likely to
I mean,
go through
just
the
because
context
it's
of a
reality
pregnancy.
doesn't mean it's just really right. I really don't. I think
I'm
that's
not
a
saying I'm
silly
just
argument.
I'm not saying I'm just telling you specifically the conditions that will lead to less abortions
I
happening through a
understand that,
voluntary
but
means
that's
and through non-restrictive means.
I do understand that, but I think just because it's reality doesn't mean we should let it continue to take its course. Just because it's reality that people may look at a fetus or whatever the case may be and say, I would much rather unalive this person than let it live and let it be in the hands of another human being. I think that's pretty sick, honestly. I don't
Well,
think that's
you
right
can
at
think
all.
that. What I think is sick is you removing people's access to an abortion for a non-sentient embryo and or zygote who literally, if you had an abortion, would never have a subjective experience ever.
Well,
The fact that
you
you
can't
put
use an
specifically
internal
that, can I please
critique on
finish?
your own point.
Can I
I
please
mean,
finish?
I wouldn't like you to, I've been respectful. You're kind of just
That's not
straw
very
manning my
respectful to
argument.
cut me off in the middle of my statement every time.
Okay, you can go on, but I think you're straw manning my argument, but you can continue.
I wasn't. I was just telling you I don't
I
think
don't
that
value sentience at all. Your point was an internal critique on your own stance. I don't value sentience, so I value life of conception.
okay. So I'm not doing it specifically as an internal critique to my own perspective. That wouldn't make any sense. I brought it up to specifically highlight the fact that you overlook things such as the subjective experience of the pregnant individual and what they have to go through, and the bodily autonomy that they're losing out on specifically in the fact that you're looking at specifically a non-sentient embryo and zygote, right? I brought that up because other people like myself and people in the live stream care about that, and I'm showing the absurdity of your worldview when I talk about it.
My So you're saying, I mean, you're saying you acknowledge science, but your stance is based off of like philosophical stances. It's not like a scientific consensus or
Morals are predicated off of your psychological preferences. They're not based upon specifically like a scientific determination. Scientific determinations are for like observational claims, things that happen in reality, right? Descriptive claims, not prescriptive
so I think
judgments or
moral
normative
concern
judgments.
that just opens the door, which I think was what you're doing right now. So it's a slippery slope. It opens a door to devaluing like human life based on ability or awareness.
Do
It's
you
like
think it's murder? Do you think
it's
it's murder
practically
to?
a form of, can I finish my point? It's practically a form of discrimination at that point.
Do you think it's murder to pull the plug on an individual in your family that's brain dead?
No, because you're letting
Then you
you're
just did the
letting
same thing.
nature.
You
Can
just
I
did the
finish
same
my
thing.
point?
You just
Can
did the
I
same
finish my
thing.
point? No, because you're letting nature take its course. You're not. You're letting you're letting nature take its course when
Yeah,
you
so
unplug
exactly.
someone.
So for example, right, if you were to specifically take the fetus out, you'd be okay with that if you just let it sit there and die because you're just letting nature take its course, right?
You taking the fetus out is a natural procedure.
Okay, so then specifically, do you think it's a natural procedure to keep someone on medical services to keep them alive who's brain dead?
No, I don't have. That's not my point. Your point. You asked me if I were to unalive someone or pull someone off the plug, and that process itself is letting nature take its course.
Okay, so if you're talking about a fetus specifically that needs life support in order to survive, if you don't specifically, if they're outside of the womb, right, and it is the case that they need life support to survive, if you were to take them off of life support and let nature take its course, right, and you don't provide them anything that they need, would it be murder under your view?
Um, is that an actual? Before I answer that, has that happened before? Is there a case where that's happened?
Yes, you understand that you
Okay.
think
Uh,
there are viable what's it called fetuses that if you don't give them medical services they will die, but they're viable given the usage of medical services.
okay, and repeat the question again. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So again, specifically in terms of this, uh, fuck, I can play it back. It was 1 second. A procedure to keep someone on medical services to keep them alive who's brain dead.
No, I don't have. That's not my point. Your point. You asked me if I were to unalive someone or pull someone off the plug, and that process itself is letting nature take its course.
Okay, so if you're talking about a fetus specifically that needs life support in order to survive, if you don't specifically, if they're outside of the womb, right, and it is the case that they need life support to survive, if you were to take them off of life support and let nature take its course, right, and you don't provide them anything that they need, would it be murder under your view?
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, and look, I guess I just want to end off on this here. I do respect your stance and whatnot, but I just want to be clear on your point. I mean, so you're acknowledging like biology and what science says life begins at conception, but at the same time, you're saying you don't morally value the fetus until it becomes sentient. And to me, that's basically like saying or admitting that like a house is visibly like structurally built, but like
You cut out. I couldn't hear you. Hello? What just happened? I can't hear him at all. I hear Trump. What the hell?
oh,
Okay, I hear you now.
hello.
Yeah, what's up?
Oh, okay, sorry. I guess you're just connected to my car. My brother must have just pulled in. Yeah, I was saying. Yeah, I mean, I think you've visibly said, and I'll let you move on after this. You said that you recognize biology and science and agree that life begins in conception, but at the same time, you're saying you don't morally, value the fetus until it's sentient. And my example that I was just given there was that that's like looking at a house that's visibly built, but then insisting that the house doesn't isn't really a house until the lights are on, which I think is kind of silly to say.
I think there's a huge
Why does
distinction
that not make
between just
sense?
lights being on a house and the distinction between
Obviously,
that and the
obviously,
house with lights on and off versus subjective experience or no subjective experience. Wouldn't you be saying the same thing?
Obviously, there's
Wouldn't you be saying that it's not a house once you turn the lights off then because you specifically think that an individual that's brain dead isn't a person anymore, right? And they
no,
specifically
no.
have
That's like
meet
if
the
you
point
were
of
to use
medical
my
death.
point. No, if you were to use my point, that's like saying the lights and everything, like the circuits and everything are running, but the lights are off. Like I would still look at that house and say that it's a house. If you were to use my point to be a
Okay, so then
parallel draw,
it'd be
whatever.
murder to pull the plug on an individual in your family that's brain dead.
No, because it's still a house if it's still a house if the lights are off.
Okay, so then you don't think it's so you do think it's murder, right?
No, I don't think it's murder.
But it's still cellular life.
Right? But if you, I mean, I don't get your point. What do you mean? It's
Yeah, you said that me saying that like a zygote isn't valuable is like saying a house with the lights off isn't a house. Well, then you specifically saying that a brain dead individual, right, isn't granted personhood, it's not murder to pull the plug on them, would then essentially mean, under your view, that you think that it's not murder to pull the plug on an individual that would meet the criteria of just like the house being there, but without the lights on, because again, they don't have subjective experience. Your comparison is subjective experience is equivalent to the lights.
no. I mean, I think you're misunderstanding my analogy there. The house basically is representing like the moral ground in that sense. But I mean, I'll just let you move on to another guest if you want.
All right, for sure. All right, let's go to the next person. Only send a guest request if you meet that set of criteria.